Okay, let's make sure that that's up. Apparently I did not have volume. There we are. Can you guys hear now? How about now? How about now? Should be able to hear me now. This is saying 100, so I'm going to take it as you guys can hear me. Good. Perfect. All right, so the thing I was saying before, since there was no sound originally in the beginning, I want to thank all patrons and everything else, all my patrons, all the people who give super cash, all the people who subscribe, who like it, share it, all that good stuff. My point originally was, you know, it's an appreciation. You guys make the channel what it is in many respects, so it is immensely appreciated. The second thing, I was giving a shout out to Jimmy Dore. Man, that has to look ridiculous in the beginning. I'm being slightly self-conscious now. Shout out to Jimmy Dore on this. So Jimmy Dore did a clip, and it was my first time seeing this clip on CNN. It's fucking awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Now, before I show this clip, I need to give a bit of context. Do you remember back in 2016, Tom Perez at one point said they rigged it. And then Tom Perez turned around and says, okay, no, they didn't rig it. They didn't rig it. Now, all of this was in relation to Democrats cheating Bernie Sanders and people being really pissed off at Democrats because they cheated Bernie Sanders. And the entire time, the entire world, everybody in the room knows the truth. You guys cheated Bernie Sanders. But Democrats didn't want to say it. And instead of saying it, they said everything that they want, everything else, other than those words. Yes, they rigged it. You caught us. So they tap danced around. And in one interview after the next, they looked fucking insane. Because the media and everyone else talking to them was perfectly aware that they were cheating the guy. Or at the very least being unfair to the guy. Even from the media standpoint, being unfair to the guy. Take a look at this. This wins my... what do I want to call it? It's like the bullshit award. It's that award where the person is, you know, spewing shit at the speed of light in order to obfuscate from actual reality, saying any and everything else. And what tends to come out is utter ridiculousness because they don't have a leg to stand on. Take a look at this. This is Dancing Man, Tom Perez. Do what he does best. And just say ridiculousness without actually saying anything. Come on.
Recently you said that the primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders. Later the same day you said you misspoke when you made those comments. Which is it?
Well, you know, here are the facts. Hillary Clinton won the Democratic primary. Hillary Clinton also won the popular vote. At the same time, because of the absence of transparency in the Democratic primary, there was a crisis of trust that ensued. And what we need in the chair of the Democratic Party is to make sure that in fact and in perception, every single day, you are fair and neutral. That's why when you asked the question before about primaries, you have to let the primary process go. If I were the chair, if I have the privilege of winning, for instance, one of the things I would recommend would be that we set the primary debate schedule long in advance of when we know who the candidates are. We have to do everything to make sure we are fair and transparent. And it's not only in how we set the primary process. The DNC is a black hole. And we have a crisis of confidence because it is. And that's why the leader of the DNC needs to make sure that we are investing in
hold on a second. Secretary, 10 seconds. Was it rigged or not?
Again, the process, because of the absence of transparency, it created that crisis of relevance. And it created the distrust that people didn't trust the outcome.
Mr. Rowan.
That is the image of a man bullshitting at the speed of light. Did you rig it or not? Did you rig it, Tom? Did you rig the thing against Bernie Sanders? That's what the guy's asking. There was an absence of transparency creating a crisis of trust, a crisis of confidence, and finally a crisis of relevance. Tom Perez is a man in the midst of a lot of crises. Crisis of relevance. Relevance is right. The answer to that question is yes. The answer to that question is yes. The only honest answer to that question is, look, we were being unfair to Bernie Sanders. And even if you don't want to go and say rigged, we were being unfair to the guy in the contest. That's the answer. That's the answer that everyone who's sitting in that stadium knows to be true, including Dancing Man here, Tom Perez. He's just too shameless to say it. So he says other ridiculous stuff. A crisis of relevance. That was a crisis. There was a crisis of confidence. Okay, Dancing Man. Okay, Dancing Man. I have a new contender. There's a new contender. There's a runner-up, if not taking the crown to Tom Perez's ridiculousness. The bullshit award. The award where you're saying something to defend something, but you're so shameless that you're not actually just going to be honest about it. Next up, Deborah Wasserman Schultz. Come on down. Come on down. Deborah Wasserman Schultz is giving an interview on CNN. And in the same way that Tom Perez was asked the question, straightforward question, and out came ridiculousness because Tom Perez didn't want to answer the question in the only honest way that everyone who's sitting there understands that question to be answered, that way, the answer to the actual question. Instead, you get utter ridiculousness. Same thing here. The reporter is shocked by this. She's shocked by this. She's aghast by this. She's like, wait a minute, did you just say so-and-so? Let's take a look at this. I don't, look, it became clear to me that at some point, CNN went down to Florida, and CNN was turning over one rock after the next. CNN was turning on the lights in one crack house after the next, looking for Deborah Wasserman Schultz. It was like, they had like a glass jar, and it was like, there she is, get her, get her. Let's bring her back, and give her money and clothing, and put lipstick on her, and put her out. We need you to do a show. And money can cover up a lot of things. You know, nice clothing. They can shine you up nicely, dragging you from Florida. What's what we're looking for? Integrity, ethics, good moral character. Those things can't necessarily be covered up by money. And if we're being fair, those things can't be polished up. Let's say it that way. If we're being fair to Deborah Wasserman Schultz, the television medium is slightly racist towards her. And I know I'm saying racist in this context, but I'm using that word in a somewhat of a flippant way. People who are, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Breathtakingly belligerent, or belligerent is not the word for it. Breathtakingly incompetent shouldn't be on television. Or at the very least, if they are on television, it makes pretty damn good television to watch. This is damn good television. Deborah Wasserman Schultz is being hysterically incompetent at the speed of light, in the same way Tom Perez was spewing bullshit at the speed of light. And the wild part about this is always, they've thought about what they were going to say. Like, these are talking points. When Tom Perez keeps saying confidence, a crisis, a crisis, a crisis, that wasn't Tom Perez pulling that out of his ass. At some point, a bunch of other incompetent people sat in the room and said, we need to explain this because they're going to ask this question. What's a good idea to go with crisis? Let's go with crisis. There was a crisis of confidence, crisis of relevance, crisis. There was a lot of fucking crises. There was a lot of crises. Let's hear Deborah Wasserman Schultz give her own rendition of spewing bullshit at the speed of light. Take it away.
That the Democrats, that Leader Schumer, what one thing did he get, you know, from Republicans to justify shutting down the government in the first place?
And by the way, just to be clear, this is on the DACA thing. So in the previous one, Tom Perez was talking about, look, it looks like you guys cheated Bernie Sanders. You said it was rigged. Was it rigged? Yes or no? Tom Perez spewing ridiculousness, dancing left and right, moonwalking, all sorts of stuff, not to answer that actual question. Deborah Wasserman Schultz, it looks like you guys failed on DACA. I mean, you guys shut the government down. What did you get out of this? Like, people were walking around with a t-shirt, I shut the government down, and all I got was a stupid t-shirt. What did you get out of shutting the government down? This looks like a failure to me. Donald Trump was saying it's a failure. Other Democrats were saying it's a failure. Jamal Thomas, Progressive Soapbox, he said it was a failure. Everybody is saying that you guys failed miserably. You shut the government down. What did you get? Did your policy demands come true because you guys reopened the government 3 days later? What did you get? Explain it. In the same way, Tom Perez didn't want to answer the question about being rigged. Deborah Wasserman Schultz does not want to answer this question about what did Democrats get out of shutting the government down. Let's take a look at her answer. This is going to be awesome.
What one thing can you point out that the Democrats, that Leader Schumer, what one thing did he get, you know, from Republicans to justify shutting down the government in the first place?
So the one thing I would say that he did get is the potential for momentum. Because if, and I'm certainly hopeful that that's what occurs, but if the majority leader, Mr. McConnell, can be taken at his word, and over the next 3 weeks before February 8th, they can negotiate on protecting the Dreamers, on making sure that we can have a full year comprehensive budget that lifts the caps and really makes sure that we can responsibly budget again.
Look at the reporter's face. She's shocked by this. She's like, did you just say potential for momentum? Is that what you just said? You have a potential for momentum? You shut the United States government down for X number of days because you wanted DACA recipients to be brought into the country or some kind of deal on the DACA recipients? And you open the government 3 days later, and you're saying that this is a win because we have the potential for momentum. Guess what? You had the potential for momentum before even shutting the government down. You had the potential for momentum before getting out of bed in the morning. You have the potential for every fucking thing. Potential to fly if you get on an airplane. I mean, you have the... That is such a ridiculous set of words that were added together. And the reporter is looking at this like, I think she just said potential for momentum. What the fuck does that mean? Let's listen to the reporter's response on this. It's comical to her. Like, that's where we are. Like, this isn't when the reporter is even pushing back all that hard on it. The reporter is somewhat amused by the ridiculousness of this answer. And the reporter understands that she's in the presence of someone who's breathtakingly incompetent. Let's keep going. Let her explain herself.
Then maybe we can be in a position to get the House and the President to come on board.
I'm still hung up, though, and I know Americans are listening, and they heard you say, and it's reverberating, potential for momentum, and they're thinking, potential for momentum, was that really worth shutting the government down for?
I love this. I love this. She's like, you know Americans are listening to this, right? Like you're not in a room by yourself. You're not in a room. Like, there are other eyes and there are other people who are watching this. And they asked you, why did you shut the United States government down? You brought it all to a stop. We're bringing the shit to a close. We're stopping it all. We're stopping it all. God damn it, we're going to fight for the DACA recipients. There are 800,000 kids, maybe 1 million kids, but fuck it, we're going to fight for them. Meaning we're going to shut the government down. 80% of the population is behind us on this. Let's fucking do it. 3 days later. All right, uncle. Now, she's asking her something that's completely fair and makes perfect sense. You guys shut the government down. You shut the government down for DACA recipients. You did not get what you wanted for DACA recipients. So what did you actually get? What was the actual point? What's the tangible gain that you could say, this is what we acquired from shutting the government down and bringing it all to a stop? We got a potential for momentum. We got a potential for momentum. That's a euphemism for nothing. That's a euphemism for nothing. She doesn't want to say nothing, but that's a euphemism for nothing. And good on the reporter for hearing this and not just bypassing it. Like, they're just going to the next thing. I like the fact that she highlighted this. It's like, you understand that you're on national television telling the American public this. Like, you know, you're not in a room. You're not talking to some random stranger. You're actually on national TV with words coming out of your mouth into other people's ears and hearing you saying they have a potential for momentum. Let's keep going. This gets more awesome.
The potential for something.
I will tell you that Republicans should be asking themselves that question because they shut the government down. This is a Trump shutdown, Brooke. They control the White House, the House, and the Senate. They have the full ability to have passed a budget, done whatever they wanted, and they couldn't because they know that the way they are trying to approach funding the government is irresponsible, and they couldn't even get all of their own members to vote for it. There is a potential for momentum if they are able to reach agreement on making sure that we can have a comprehensive budget deal, get our disaster relief passed to protect the communities that have been devastated by natural disasters, make sure we responsibly fund our military, our community health centers, and children's health insurance, and our Dreamers. And then eventually, hopefully, we can get some agreement from the House and the President. My concern is that this is an exclusively Senate deal. The House and the Senate and the White House have had, no part of this, and so the momentum is what I'm hopeful about. And
Sure.
we'll just have to wait and see. But I can't vote yes on wait and see.
Yes, the video looks like it's getting a little shaky for the connection. I'll upload this if the coverage is bad. I have an extra copy of it. This is insane, and she's standing by this. Like, she's standing by the comment. Well, look, there's a potential for momentum if Republicans, come to the table and make deals with us. Well, at that point, that's not really a potential for momentum. You're essentially saying that if they do something, then something else will take place. That's called just life. That's just life. Let's let her finish this. I just want to get across. Potential for momentum is nothing. It's a euphemism for nothing. What did you get for shutting the government down? Nothing. Nothing. The last thing that she just said is probably the most important thing outside of the ridiculousness. This had nothing to do with the House. This has nothing to do with the president. You have other people in government that needs to sign off on this deal, meaning anything that the Senate does, the House still needs to also come to some agreement on. You got no agreements from Paul Ryan. You got no agreements from Donald Trump. You shut the government down. You reopened it saying that, well, Mitch McConnell gave us promises. He pledged that he'll bring this issue up. You don't even know if Mitch McConnell can deliver the votes to even get you to vote in the Senate. You understand that you had a potential for momentum when you got out of bed that morning. You had a potential for momentum before you shut the government down. At this very moment, I have the potential for momentum to do all sorts of things. It doesn't mean anything. This is a bullshit statement. This statement, somebody thought this up somewhere. Somebody thought this up. Somebody said, look, we need an answer for this. I have a good idea. We can tell them that we had a potential for momentum. Yes, Debbie, that's what you need to say. You go out there and you sell that. Potential for momentum. Yes, that's awesome. That's what we're going to get behind. That's our new statement. That's what we're going to get behind. That means nothing. That means you did nothing. That means you failed. That's you not wanting to own up to the fact that you failed. And I got to be honest. This kills credibility. I mean, there's a level of shamelessness of not just being able to say, yeah, we didn't really get what we wanted on this deal, but we, hopefully McConnell will come through. I guess my point is there's a way to coat this without getting to this heights of ridiculousness. This is a baffling level of stupidity. Let's keep going.
Understand, and on the potential for momentum, let's go with that
She's
argument.
laughing at her.
On that,
She's
do you
laughing.
think that Senate Democrats should trust Mitch McConnell and his promise, his intention to deal with this in 3 weeks?
I'm not a Senate Democrat, so I can't judge what a Senate Democrat should or should not be doing. I am a House Democrat, and I can tell you that there's no trust here on the House side because there's been none earned. The Republican leadership in the House has not been included in this deal, was not asked to sign off, and actually over the weekend when Paul Ryan was asked to sign off, he said no. And so the bill that I'll have in front of me has no confirmation from me and my comfort level that even if they get momentum, that the House will take it up or that the president will sign it. So this Trump shutdown is purely a result of their ineptitude, their inability to govern, and the madness has to stop. And it's only going to stop if we sit down at the table, work together, hammer out a compromise on the variety of issues that are absolutely essential to the American people's quality of life.
On that word compromise, I was talking to one of your colleagues in the House, Luis Gutierrez, over the weekend in D.C., and, I know several Democrats, him included, they say they actually support building the wall, give the president his big, beautiful wall in exchange for Dreamer help. Do you back that?
I mean, let's not say.
Do you do that?
I sat next to Luis Gutierrez in caucus today. He doesn't support the wall, so don't characterize it that way.
To be clear, I actually agree with that. I give two shits about that wall. I don't care about the wall. They're using this as a political gamesmanship at this point. Donald Trump said he wanted to get a big, beautiful wall. He was going to get Mexico to pay for the wall. The guy in Mexico said, we're not building that fucking wall. And nobody in their right mind thought Mexico was going to build that goddamn wall. Now, the argument that Democrats make don't even include that. Like this case of, well, wait a minute. You said Mexico was going to build the wall. Now you're asking us to fund your wall? What the fuck? They don't do that. They should build the wall. Let them build the wall. Give them what they want to build the wall. If Donald Trump wants $10 billion to build the wall, fuck it. Give him $10 billion and let him build that wall. I don't care. It's a barrier. The barrier is somewhat unnecessary, but I don't care. If they want to waste money on it, fair enough. I don't particularly care. I do care about the 800,000 or the million or so kids who were born into this country illegally and who is going to be deported if nothing is done for this particular thing. If nothing is done to fix DACA. If a deal entails building a wall, let them build the wall. The wall is not that big of a deal. And hell, I question how much of that wall would even get built in the time that Donald Trump is going to be in office. So let's keep going. This one gets funny though, because Deborah Wasserman Schultz is like, hey, let's not characterize it as he's in support of the wall. I am not technically in support of just building a wall willy-nilly for no reason. I am in support of building a wall if that means that those kids can stay into the country. There's a difference in those things. The reporter is making this point of, well, look, are you in favor of the wall? Meaning, are you willing to give Donald Trump that trophy, that win, that visceral win of, yes, we're going to build the wall? Listen to her answer. She doesn't want to own up to the other Democrats being on board for this. I don't particularly know why she doesn't want to own up to it, but let's keep going.
He sat with me, Congresswoman, he sat with me in the D.C. Bureau on Saturday saying, give me a hammer and nails, I will build that wall myself if I get protection.
Right.
For
he
dreamers.
said he was willing to compromise on it, but let's not characterize that as support for the wall. None of us, I don't know any Democrat that supports this wall, and most Republicans don't support it.
That's awesome. She's like, I wouldn't characterize their support. Well, he said, give me the hammer and nails, I'll build that goddamn wall myself. Well, yeah, but that's not really him supporting it. I understand the point that she's making. And to be fair to Deborah Wasserman Schultz, she has a point. I mean, she's making, I guess, the point that I'm making. It's one thing to say I support the wall just outright. It's another thing to say I'm supporting it in order to some kind of arrangement or some deal in order to keep the kids in the country. Those are technically different things. So I'll be fair to her. Let's keep going.
But what we do need to do to protect 800,000 dreamers who were brought to this country through no fault of their own is sit down together at the table and have a discussion and a comprehensive compromise legislation that we can put on the floor that both houses will sign off on and the president will sign into law. And if that ultimately in that discussion includes some version of a wall, then if it's the bipartisan will to do that, then that's something that should be considered. But I'm not going to cherry pick, every part of what could be considered to reach a deal to protect our dreamers. I just want to make sure that we're sitting down together at the table and talking about achieving that. And thus far, the Republicans on the House side, in particular, have been unwilling to do that.
Sure. Well, 87% of the country agrees with you on protecting the dreamers. So there's that. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, good to see you.
I love this reporter. I love this woman. She is awesome. She wasn't being rude or anything like that. She was... I don't know what her entire interview was supposed to be. But it's very clear at a certain point when she was like, wait a minute. A potential for momentum. At that point, half of the interview was, potential for momentum. And the last point she's throwing in, well, 87% of the country agrees with you. You shut the government down. You had 87% support across the nation. You shut the government down and reopened the government in 3 days with nothing to show for it. With 87% of the public backing you on this. At a certain point, it gets embarrassing. At a certain point, it gets embarrassing. Deborah Wasserman Schultz. She's getting my bullshit award. The thing is there a more competent way of answering that question? And I think there is a more competent way of answering that question. I just don't necessarily think she was there. So, somebody says, I don't see the need to be fair to a criminal. You're a far kinder person than I am. Well, look, here's my point, or here's my reason. If shamelessness is not rewarded. Like, so it's one thing if you're in politics, somebody asks you a question. If you're going to be shameless, then at that point, nothing you say can be trusted. Like, the moment that you're doing something like this, where they're like, what did you get out of this? And the real answer to that is, we got nothing. We got a stupid t-shirt. That's what we ended up getting out of this. But you can't say that. Now, the reporter knows the answer to that question. Everybody who's looking at this knows the answer to that question. And yet, the person bullshits. The person bullshits. I would rather be fair to the person, even if it's somebody who I don't like. It's an issue of credibility. I guess that's my issue with it. Yeah, man, this medium is not kind to the flagrantly delinquent. Deborah Wasserman Schultz does not do television well. If they needed somebody to stare at a wall or stare at somebody for 2 hours without blinking, Deborah Wasserman Schultz would be a person. If they needed someone to burp all of the alphabets, Deborah Wasserman Schultz will be your person. Is this the person that you want out explaining to the American public that we failed on DACA, no, we didn't get anything from this deal, but we shut the government down in order to get a potential for momentum? Do you believe that potential could be anything? Well, I mean, I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to speculate. It's amazing. I find that is an amazing video. If Deborah Wasserman Schultz was also the person who did that video where they were saying superdelegates was to keep out the riffraff. She didn't use the term riffraff, but she was like, look, we don't want some random bum upsetting our apple cart. We have a workable point of view of the world that is the Democratic Party, and in order to keep the grassroots out, we need these things like superdelegates. And you're like, wait a minute, you just said that you don't want people to participate in the democratic process unless they're of a particular type. The governing class. The governing class. So, Deborah Wasserman Schultz being flagrantly ridiculous, talking about DACA and why Democrats failed on DACA, and that ultimately all of the failure boiled down to a potential for momentum. This takes my award. I think she beats Tom Perez. I think this is worse than Dancing Man. I honestly do. I think this is much worse than Dancing Man. Unlikely ally. Jamal, when you said believe it or not, I agree with her about it. I'm not supporting, but wait. I rolled my eyes. Was like, really, dude? But your argument was solid. This is a good point. Yeah, come on. She is right about that part. The guy is saying, I'll build a goddamn wall myself. I think the wall is fucking absurd. I think it's pointless. I think, there's other things dealing with immigration. America always takes this muscular approach to each and every problem, even when the muscular approach is somewhat problematic in and of itself. So we're going to fight terrorism by creating more terrorists because it looks good when you're bombing and killing people and everything else. So we're going to have this muscular military. And it's like, but the kill lists keep getting longer. Is your objective to create more terrorists? Because that's exactly what you're doing. In this particular case, we need to stop people from coming into this country. So let's just build a wall. Are there other ways to dissuade people from coming into the United States that doesn't involve depriving them of water on the way here or creating some ridiculous border wall? These solutions are not in these things. I guess let me say it that way. Like, the solution to this is not necessarily building a border wall. That's not necessarily going to get you to where you're trying to accomplish. But from his base, it looks good. It's a shiny object that he could hold around and say, see, this is what I got. I said I was going to build a wall and I was going to keep those rapists and drug dealers out of the country. And I, Donald Trump, am going to build that wall. Give him his win. I don't care about his win. I don't care about that wall. I don't even know if that wall, this is kind of my point. I don't even know if that wall is something that's going to end up being built by the time Trump is in that office. I don't care about the physical barrier. Let him build his wall. I do care about the flesh and blood human beings that are going to be kicked out of that country as a result of the failures associated with Democrats on DACA. I do care about that. Between the non-physical thing or the inanimate thing versus the thing that's actually animate, I would give credence to the animate thing, to the people themselves. So, if that includes building a wall, then I'm okay with it. That was her point. That was her point. The reporter's point was trying to get across, yes, but are you okay with this in relation to a deal? She didn't want to say yes to that question, so there's that. Let's see. You're referring to Debbie, aren't you? I'm telling you, you're fucked now, sir. Yeah. Yeah, I'm referring to Debbie. It's so fascinating to watch our government battle itself for control while opposing work together to keep power out of the hands of people. Yeah, and this is one of the people who used to say stuff like that. Let's see. Yes, that potential for momentum cracked me up. Marta K, it is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. It's like a catchphrase of sorts, but I keep thinking to myself, did you come up with that on the fly, or was that something that you guys thought up in some kind of think tank somewhere? It's like, hey, we need an answer for why we failed so miserably on DACA. And look, what the reporter is asking is perfectly fair. I'm out of the country. I hear Democrats shut the government down. And I hear they shut the government down because they're trying to get a deal on DACA recipients. Great. Great. Good job. You're actually standing for something. You're actually representing something. Fair enough. Good job. 3 days later, I'm in a different country and I hear they've opened the government back up. Great. Did they get a deal on DACA? No, they did not get a deal on DACA. Then why did they open the government back up? Mitch McConnell said that he would talk to them. Mitch McConnell wasn't talking to them already? No, he said he'll talk to them. He'll bring this issue up. But wait a minute. Does him bringing the issue up mean that they're going to get a deal on it? No. Does it mean that Paul Ryan is going to deal on it? No. Does it mean Donald Trump is going to? No. Does it mean that Mitch McConnell can even deliver the votes and sit? No, it does not. It does not. A few days later, I get back to the States. Senate Democrats has taken DACA off the table in negotiations. It is now off the table. It is not necessary for a deal. What Democrats say, we'll hopefully get to it after we come up with some kind of budget deal. We'll get to it later. We'll get to it later. That's your resistance, ladies and gentlemen. That's your resistance. That woman, that dancing woman, that flagrantly incompetent woman is the resistance. And don't just take my word for her being incompetent. I mean, Donna Brazile, when she wrote that piece in Politico, she was like, Deborah Wasserman Schultz was quote-unquote not a good manager. She was being immensely polite. She was being extraordinarily polite. Either she was incompetent, either she was corrupt, some combination of both. An answer like this, in relation to the other stuff that's taken place in regards to Deborah Wasserman Schultz throughout her career, particularly in that last primary. Yeah, when I say incompetent, I think there's a track record of incompetence to kind of back that up. So, I will leave it at that. I'm not going to stay too long on this one because I have a few more that I want to do after this. Garneau, they aren't incompetent, Jamal. The reason why McConnell didn't matter is because the deal was done. The details don't matter. The public will forget the holes in the narrative in a matter of days. That part is probably true. In fact, I would do you one better, Garneau. Not even forget the details. Won't even remember that this took place in the first place. They won't know it took place. Like, most of the public is not following this stuff. Like, they don't necessarily know the details, the inner workings of each and everything. It's very possible that Deborah Wasserman Schultz getting on here looking like a fucking maniac. Somebody looks at that and says, that sounds like a completely plausible thing. That sounds a potential for momentum. Yeah. That's what they got. Fucking A, man. They got a potential for momentum. It's a potential to get shit done. A potential that didn't exist before. It's like, come on. The point following politics is something to do. I don't expect anything to get better or ones to go to jail. There are us folks stuck picking aside a whole bunch who don't seem to care either way. Kristen Nye. So yes and no. Yes and no. I think elections do have consequences. I think politics do have consequences. Now, the problem of it is most people are so removed from the process that those consequences aren't necessarily all that apparent. The people who are going to be deported, those are real things. Those are real people. The policies, the things that these guys are quibbling over, those are real things. There are actually going to be people at the end of this process that are affected either adversely or to the positive. Now, I think your point, however, is the human being, us, in relation to the government itself. Like there seems to be such a disconnect between the human being and what the human being wants versus what the government does. And in that case, you're perfectly right. You're perfectly right. What people want, when you talk to just regular people, take politics out of it. When you just ask them, issue by issue by issue, what do they want? Even, not just what do they want, what do they believe the world is? Meaning, like, what is your paradigm of the world? For instance, you might say, what is wealth income distribution within the United States? And they would give you their idea on how much, is that 1% and all these other numbers. Most people are skewed way into this idea of what the world is. So they think the world is more fair than what the world actually is, particularly if the person is doing relatively well. So they would say, well, look, income inequality, it's bad, but how bad can it actually be? They don't have a concept on how bad those things are. They don't have a concept of the poverty that's in the country itself. It feels that people are far removed and separate and distinct from the political apparatus itself. And I don't necessarily think you're wrong on that. It's one of the reasons why people disengage from the process. You have 50% of the country that doesn't vote. Presidential election. They check out of the process. I don't think they're checking out because they didn't necessarily care. I think they're checking out because they think they don't matter. Both parties are fundamentally the same. Both parties serve a particular master. I don't need to be a part of this process. Let them figure out the way to get their own votes. I'm checking out. I strongly suspect that's what takes place. Who did this? Oh, Bad Mama Jamma. Thank you. Thank you for being an island of truth and reason in an ocean of bullshit. Keep doing this, young man. Much respect. Thank you, Bad Mama Jamma. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And yeah, it is somewhat picking a side. The problem is that people pick sides. There may be policy stuff that takes place that you like or you dislike. That's one thing. It's another thing to identify yourself with someone. The moment you make the cognitive connection with one side or the other, you've chosen certain properties that are associated with picking that particular side, if that makes sense. Like, it's almost like you put yourself in a box. And human beings, and the way that human beings are, often try to conform to the box that they put themselves in. Also almost becomes this kind of tribal thing. The person at that point is not a Democrat from a political standpoint. They're a Democrat from a cultural standpoint. Same thing with Republicans. That's not the easiest thing in the world to get past. Because for them, this is somewhat tribal thing. It's like a football game. In that case, yeah, the politics itself gets kind of lost in the process. Particularly from the standpoint of human beings and us being instrumental in the system. That Princeton study was showing how what the public wants is like statistical noise in the process. It's just noise. What has sway in the process, essentially, is the people who are giving them cash. Here's a bunch of money. I need you to do me a favor. Thank you for that money. And now I would do that favor so I can get more money again the next time I run. And I don't want you to also put that money against me. So, yes, I would do that favor. What else do you need from me? What else do you need? Not voting and unregistering is a step. I do think pulling out of the political process is somewhat of a step, but not fully. I don't think I fully agree with it. I still think the apparatus, look, you're stuck with one or two things. And this is always a question. Reform or revolution? There are no in-betweens. Either you try to reform the system itself the way it is, or you feel like the system is so fundamentally broken and corrupt that you have to go outside of the system, essentially be something like Batman in order to get stuff done. Batman are not bound by the laws because justice requires this kind of greater thing than the law or the legal system can muster. At that point, you're talking about a revolution. You're talking about something external from the political apparatus in the process. Personally, I think you need the political apparatus. I think you need it. In any, and I say I think you need this from the standpoint of the public, this kind of proletariat dictatorship sorts, where you have kind of workers getting their shit together and actually creating this own party, their own thing. And the reason I say that is having something to represent your interests is, I think, the point. Those people who pull themselves out of the process feel like there is nothing in the process for them. There's nobody who they look up and it feels that they're representing their interests. Bernie Sanders was such a breath of fresh air because for the first time he had all these people saying, oh my God, this guy is actually saying this. This guy has been behaving this way for 40 years. Oh my God. Nobody has ever seen anything like him. It's like a breath of fresh air. Like, oh my God, he opened the door and it feels great outside. Did you feel the breeze? Yes, I felt that breeze. I felt that breeze. Having a workers' party, having something that actually advocates for the human being, not necessarily for the corporate interests in the two parties. Having something that's fundamentally different is something that we don't have in the United States. And I would almost guarantee you, if we did, those people who checked out of the process would actually have something that they can get behind. I strongly suspect the 59 or the 50% that don't vote, that said, fuck it, I don't want to have anything to do with the process. If those people believe that somebody represented them, those people will probably vote. I don't think the apparatus is so broken and abused that it can't necessarily be fixed. And I think if you're looking for a way of some kind of level of legitimacy, you have to take it through the apparatus itself. I think you have to. J. Scott, Workers' Family Party. I saw an interview with those guys. Zox Alex, I'm almost to the point of not voting myself. Likely we'll all stop voting in the current system before too long. Yeah, I've gotten to the point. I voted for Stein. I voted for Green. I think in the last election I ended up voting for Libertarian. My rule is pretty straightforward. Vote for the person you believe represents your interests. Don't just give somebody your vote. Your vote is not a perfunctory thing. When these guys are screaming about accountability and they're saying, you know, it's like, no, you need to vote him in office. And you need to hold him accountable once you get him in office. So, yes, I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton, and I'm going to be against her every day of the week, or, you know, whatever. Whatever they say is their excuse for voting the Democrat in office and saying you have to vote for that particular Democrat. And the excuse they use is, well, what's important is activism. Is giving them your vote. And then once you give them your vote, you pressure them. You say bad words to them, and you scream at them, you shake your fist at them, and you get on camera, and you berate them. That's how you get stuff done. And it's like, why do I have to do all that? Like, if I have to do all that, if you have to have all of these activists, people scouring and pushing and trying to get those people to do, then they're not already on your side. You fundamentally put somebody in office who doesn't represent your interests. And this is kind of the problem. You need to stop going for people who don't represent your interests. What's the point in voting for somebody if that person is not going to be on your side? Think about the ridiculousness of the situation. You had a Republican Party that was locked, stocked, and barreled for the wealthy and the rich. Fair enough. They had their party. You had Democrats who were supposed to be for everybody else. Democrats get corporate. Bill Clinton gets more money than any other Democrat or any other person who was running up at the time, including outraising his opponent, the Republican. Bill Clinton gets in office and does some of the most right-wing shit that even Republicans wouldn't have been able to get done. Explain to me something. Explain to me. You can't serve two masters. Meaning, what are you fundamentally representing if you have two opposing things that are built into your party? Meaning you have plutocrats on one end, and you have everybody else on the other end in the party, meaning the lefties. And the lefties in the party are antagonistic to the plutocrats because those lefties know that they're being exploited by the rich. The plutocrats are antagonistic towards the other people because they want more cash from those other people. They want to keep more of their money. They want less taxes. They want more benefits and handouts, these kind of corporate handouts from the government itself. They want things from the government at our expense. These forces are antagonistic to one another. These things don't work together. You can't serve both masters. There is no utopian solution where both parties are satisfied, both parties are happy, and everybody is whistling in the sun. You need to pick a pony. You pick a side. And up to this point, the side has been towards corporate interests, the people who's giving them the cash. You have dollars or you have pitchforks. You have one or the other. Up to this point, you've had dollars. And you know, whether you want to talk about unions, whether you want to talk about blacks, Hispanics, LGBTQ, all of these groups, for the most part, are just giving their votes away to this particular party, getting nothing in return other than them saying, we don't hate you. We'll accept your identity. But that's it. That's our bar. Just being a decent human being is the bar that we're going to set for our standards. But yeah, we're going to be corporate. We're going to say nice things to you. We're going to pretend and say things like we're FDR or one of those guys. Usually the rhetoric is going to be empty. It's not going to just going to be platitudes. Because you must understand that we can't say anything else that would adversely affect our corporate donors. You get that? We can't say anything like that. They're not going to give us money if we say stuff that these lefties want. And if we do stuff that these lefties want, they're definitely not going to give us money. So we have a dilemma. How do we handle this dilemma? We're moderates. We're moderates. We take a bunch of money and we do incremental changes. And we call ourselves moderates as if that's an actual thing. That's not an actual thing. That's a person being bribed and trying to come up with a reason for being bribed. Just like this person coming up with this catch term of what you say? I can't think of the thing that you said. This relevance or something like that. Not right, relevance. The potential for momentum. It's a catch term. It's not a real thing. Either you have values or you don't. Who do you represent? And up to this point, they've only represented one interest. The argument in Congress are just between plutocrats. Democrats will say whatever they have to say to get your vote, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to actually delivering policy that represents your interests, they are not going to be anywhere to be found. Look at the last 8 years. Look at the last president before that, meaning Bill Clinton. Do you understand that a Hillary Clinton presidency and a Jeb Bush presidency were almost indistinguishable from one another, or would have been nearly indistinguishable from one another? The parties are fundamentally the same. There are minor differences, but the parties are fundamentally the same. That's my point. Voting for people who represent your interests is the point. That's my point. And right now, most of these guys don't represent anybody's interests but their own. Until the public gets to the point where they can pull themselves out of the political process, then there is no such thing as accountability. Like, if you're saying, I am so terrified of Donald Trump that I'm going to vote for somebody who I completely despise, then there's no credibility. It doesn't matter what the person does in office. You're so terrified of this other guy that you're willing to give your vote up in this kind of, arm-twisted way, just out of cowardice. Here's my vote. I'm terrified. Here's my vote. I'm terrified. In that model of the world, there is no such thing as accountability. How can you be held accountable when the other person continuously has a gun to your head? If it wasn't Donald Trump, it would be Ted Cruz. If it's not Ted Cruz, it'll be that other maniac, the religious theocrat that's in Vice President Pence. There is a host of crazies that are lining up to run in the presidency for the Republican side, or that would have been lining up to run on the Republican side. You're always going to have a gun to your head. Always. So what do? Are you going to vote for the Democrat in perpetuity because you're always terrified of the other guy? Or do you finally grow a pair? I want to say grow a pair. I'm trying to think of a reference to a vagina in this case, but I don't know what one would be. But stiffen your vagina, I guess. And being willing to say no. Being willing to say no. If you're not willing to say no, there's no such thing as accountability. Meaning those people can do whatever they want to do in that office because people are so terrified of the other person. And just to put a fine bow on it, because I've rambled on for a bit. In the next coming election in 2018, one of the issues is going to end up being, are you going to put those people back in office after doing nothing to change why they lost in the first place? Meaning, Democrats didn't lose 1,100 seats for no reason. They didn't lose it for no reason. It wasn't a situation where they just magically lost all those seats. There was something fundamentally wrong with the way that party behaves and operates. And there's a fundamental distrust in the actors that are associated with that party. Deborah Wasserman Schultz is a great example of that, where you're seeing this person shamelessly, flagrantly misstate reality or spin reality in this kind of ridiculous, comical way. There's a massive distrust in this way. There should be a massive distrust. And there should be a certain amount of cynicism when dealing with these guys. They fucking cheated in one of the primaries. Didn't even want to say it. Didn't even want to own up to it. So, yeah. I'm rambling on. I will say this. In the coming election in 2018, Democrats believe that they're going to take the House and may even take the Senate. Now, understand, this is taking the House and the Senate without making any fundamental changes to the party at all. And beyond not making any fundamental changes to the party at all, to still scream about Trump. And using the screaming about Trump as being the thing that gets them over the hurdle. So, yes, we lost 1,100 seats. No, we're not going to do anything to fundamentally change in order to get those people back in an actual, real, policy-driven way. We're going to double down on Trump. Those people are going to be terrified, and they're going to vote us back in office, and we don't have to do anything. It's awesome. It's awesome conning the American public. We'll see, man. If they're able to take the House and the Senate back in 2018, the lesson that they would have received from that is we don't have to do squat. We don't have to change squat. People will vote for us anyway. And that is not the lesson that you want to give Democrats. The best thing that could have happened to them was they would have lost in Virginia and lost in one of these other states. Not so much that it would have been awesome for the people living in those states, myself included. I don't want that maniac as governor. But there's something else that's also true. Emboldening them on this allows us belief that we don't have to change. People will vote us back in just by virtue of not being the opposition. Just how bad Donald Trump is. And if they get that lesson, you can kiss the Unity Commission goodbye. Kiss it goodbye. What's the point of a Unity Commission when you've already got reelected? The strength and the force of the Unity Commission thing was purely related to the losses that the Democratic Party suffered. If those losses turn around, and if you have a situation where you have all of these people getting elected in some kind of wave election as a rebuke of Donald Trump, where did your leverage go? Like, there's no man outside at the door. There's no doombringer at that point. That man has gone away. You're left on this thing of Democrats needing to change on their own, with the lesson of we don't have to change at all because people will still vote us back in office. We'll see. Let's see what happens in 2018. I am skeptical of the Unity Commission, though, particularly if Democrats win. If Democrats win. And leave it at this. The last thing I saw on this, they were arguing about whether or not the Democrats were even going to go through with the Unity Commission ideals. I kept saying, and I don't want to say I told you so, even though I'm saying I told you so because, I'm not big enough a person not to say I told you so. But the force of their argument was in Demexit. That was the force of their argument. This wasn't a situation where they could carry this on their own. You needed somebody standing outside the door of this is what's going to take place if you don't do right by me. They didn't want that. They wanted to do the entire Dem-Enter strategy. We just want to go into the Democratic Party. We're going to change the Democratic Party. We're going to board the ship, and we're going to take this over, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now they're like, they're not letting us run. They're not letting us run. They're not giving us the votes, or they're not giving us the voting rolls. They're being unfair to us. They're being unfair to us. And now I think one of the last tweets that people were saying, they don't want to take our reforms. They don't want to take our reforms. Your biggest brick was the fact that they had lost all those races. Your second biggest brick was the Demexit campaign, meaning the people who were willing to leave the party. And if you wanted the party to change, the way you get that party to change is to be willing to leave. Think of being in an abusive relationship where the guy beats the shit out of you constantly. It's like he has sex with the maid. He slaps your kid. He doesn't wash his hands when he's making food. Like all this stuff. Just gross, nasty stuff. And in your mind, he has a good heart, so I'm going to stay with him. I'm going to change him. He's a heroin addict. I'm going to stay with him. I'm going to change him. I'm going to bring him back to some semblance of life. I'm going to re-ensole him. All the while being used and manipulated year after year after year after year after year. If you want him to change, if you want her to change, you leave. You have the capacity to leave. Let them get their shit together without you. And we have that conversation later. But at this moment, emboldening people who are, this kind of Stockholm syndrome, it's not the way to go, man. It's not the way to go. Gardner, the Unity Commission, cue up the circus music. Yes, cue up the circus music. And not even the circus music. It's the music that plays when the thing is running out of steam. They're just kind of going away. It's like you just hear it trailing off in the background. You understand, Tom Perez, if he wanted to, could have implemented those changes by himself. Could have implemented it by himself. He's like, I support those changes. Okay, Tom, dancing man, implement them. Well, I'm gonna let them vote. When are they gonna vote? 7, 8 months? I guess 8 months. It's a show. This is a circus. That's all it is. That's all it is. Henry Wallace. Lisa Hauserman. Yes, it's been the same thing since 1944 with Henry Wallace. Nobody learns lessons in the country. Good evening, everyone. Lisa, I love the fact that you brought up Wallace. Because you're right. This is similar to Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace got shafted. He could have been vice president. Well, at one point he was vice president. But FDR was ill. FDR was sick. And the first time FDR went to bat for Wallace, essentially, I'm not going to run for president if you guys don't put Wallace on the ballot. The second time around, or that particular time, however, FDR was ill. And FDR didn't necessarily have the stamina to go down and fight for Wallace in the way that he did before. Wallace was close to getting to the mic. And the right-wing party, or the right-wing aspects of the party, shut down the conversation in order to keep those people from electing Wallace as vice president. The very next time around, they were able to put in Truman. Truman ended up being the vice president of the United States. Truman ends up being the president when FDR dies. Truman ends up being the one who drops the bomb on Japan, even though Japan was already beaten. We paid for it, might as well drop it and see what it does. And let's make an example to the Russians. He didn't need to drop that bomb. Japan was already looking for peace treaties or looking for peace deals. They had just been attacked by Russia. They were falling apart. They were completely falling apart. He murdered all those people for no reason. Martha Kay. I'm a DACA recipient, so you can understand how pissed, scared, and disappointed I was. Anyway, thanks uber much for your support, Jamal, and for the support of Dreamers and so much more. Thank you, Martha. And yeah, you do have my support. I just wish Democrats also supported you in this way. They shut the fucking government down, and 3 days later, we give. Yes, we have 84% backing of the entire American public, but the Republicans called us bad names, and we don't like it when they call us bad names. So we had to reinstall the government. And Mitch McConnell, he's a good, decent, and honest man. He looked me in the eye, he saw my soul, and he said, we'll talk about it later. And I believed him when he said it. I believed Mitch McConnell when he said it. And this other one, we have the potential for momentum. It's ridiculous, man. This is too ridiculous. The opposition. The resistance. The resistance. They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. Yeah, I love that one too. Captain Obvious. I love that one too. Wallace and Gromit on my wall. Yeah, man, Wallace was amazing. He's lost in history in many respects, but Wallace was like a lefty's lefty. Like, even back during that time, we call the guy a fucking communist. He wasn't a communist. I'm saying, but he was far to the left. Even from the standpoint of Sanders. Like, when you're talking about, like, war policy at home, meaning domestic policy, Wallace, you would have ended up with a social democracy. It's highly unlikely that Wallace would have dropped that bomb. The tenor of the United States towards the Soviet Union after the war would have been fundamentally different with Wallace in that office. With Truman, you had a hawk. Not just that, you had an incompetent hawk who was on the right-wing aspects of the party itself. And you got that trajectory of Democrats leading into the way, this kind of warmongering, profiteering, demographic group. Why don't progressives create their own political committee? Yes, Rodney, I agree. Now, to be fair, lefties have started coalescing around in what is called People's Party, the thing that Nick Braun is doing. I don't know how much steam Braun has on this. I would love to help him on this. I guess, but I don't necessarily know what skill set I have that would be of any benefit. But Braun is trying to organize this. He's trying to bring together all these different groups like Greens and Socialists and Independents. Essentially, these people who are wayward Democrats who've seen the light. He's trying to organize the left. This idea of having, like you said, a committee. And all of these different committees come together, and those committees kind of hash out what they themselves want for some kind of independent party. I think it's necessary. Whether it's hard or not, it's fundamentally necessary if you want to get anything done. So, and just one last point on this. This isn't politics just for the sake of politics. Like, this is not Deborah Wasserman Schultz coming out saying, there's a potential for momentum. That's literally just political jargon for nothing. It's incompetence at a level that's breathtaking. It doesn't even make sense. If you're going to make an argument for something and you're going to make a political argument that tries to fly, you at the very least want it to be plausible, and you don't want to look like a dumbass when you're making it. if the reporter is asking you questions and she's laughing at you while she's asking you questions, and she asks the same question multiple times because it's so ridiculous, your answer is so ridiculous, then you fucked up somewhere. Like, you've looked ridiculous in an interview. That's her playing politics for the sake of politics in order to obfuscate from saying that, yes, we failed, we caved, we gave up on the DACA recipients, and then we ultimately took it off the table after shutting down the United States government. Trump. Yeah, Trump. It's like you pull the escape line. But we actually have issues. Like, yes, this is politics from the ridiculous standpoint, but there are actual, real, tangible issues that affect human beings. Like, the environmental thing. Let's take everything else off the table. Take the economic argument, meaning how people relate to society, the economy, poverty. Take all that stuff off the table. Environment by itself is a game changer. Like, there are real things. We're a fucking ball flying through the cosmos. There are real things that we as a society need to attend to. And instead of attending to those things, we're talking about Russia, and we're talking about murdering people abroad, and we're talking about wars. And, well, we're not really talking about wars, but they're doing the wars. Like, this is flagrant behavior. And yet, the thing that we're talking about is ridiculousness. We're talking about ridiculousness. Environment by itself, man, is a game changer. I mean, you have scientists with their hair on fire saying, oh my God, we're going to kill ourselves. We're going to kill ourselves. Talking about the jet stream shutting down, intense hurricanes. You're talking about water encroaching on some of the states. I mean, you're talking about mass migrations purely from just the weather phenomena or the way that the world or the sea level changes. You're talking about catastrophic events. We don't even know that if the ice melts and the methane would accelerate the global warming effect. Whether you want to talk about sperm count, whether you want to talk about plastic in our oceans, let's bring back in the economic front. The idea of machines taking jobs because machines will get cheaper than the human beings that actually do the same task. This kind of technological unemployment. They are actual real things that we need to deal with and address in our society. Talking about fucking Russia. And something like this, where this is not even this kind of existential threat or this thing that the country is being attacked by. This is just something that these assholes should get together and compromise on. They can't even do that right. Democrats use DACA as a whipping board, something to either hit Republicans over the head with or something to try to intimidate Hispanics by. It's the gun that Obama would put to their head saying, you either vote for Hillary Clinton or else. This guy says you're a rapist and a drug dealer. You want that guy in office? Then you better vote for Hillary Clinton. They play politics with this issue, even though there are real beings at the end of this issue. Politics does, at times, have real-world consequences. This is one of those times where it has a real-world consequence. And the shit that she's saying is ridiculous. I can't imagine being a DACA recipient, being somebody who was brought into this country by a parent or somebody else who was looking for a better life for themselves and their kids. And my mom gets deported, or my dad gets deported. And the government is looking at me. Meaning, I gave the government my information under the Obama administration because I was told that ultimately I'd be able to stay into the country and they work the shit out and all this other stuff. And now the information that I gave to Obama is now in the hands of Donald Trump and his companies. This guy said I'm a rapist and a drug dealer. This guy said that all these other countries are just shithole countries. This guy clearly has a perspective of me. And in having that perspective of me, he's looking at me to potentially deport me out of the country. This is the only country I've ever known. This is the only country I've ever been in. And he's looking at me to deport me out of the fucking country. Who's my resistance? And I see this person on TV spewing ridiculousness that they shut the government down because of DACA, reopened the government without getting anything on DACA, and then a few days later took DACA completely off the table. And yet they're screaming that they're the resistance. I'm just saying, I would be terrified. That's all I'm saying. Putting myself in those shoes, I would be fucking terrified if these are the people who are supposed to be representing your interests. They scream at the top of their lungs to get your vote. And then when it comes down to it, brass tacks, this is what you get. This is what you get. So, I'm going to leave it at that. I have a few more of these. This one went a little bit longer. But it's perfectly okay. I like, we're just back and forth. I usually do my spiel in the beginning, and then at that point, let's see. Jamal should go on. He can stand up and filibuster for 48 hours straight by talking about Star Trek. Oh, man. That would be an epic filibuster. That would be fucking epic. I think I would have help. I think there would be other people that would help. I think there would be other people who can also help. I don't even know if you could classify what he said as McCarthyism. You're making a McCarthyism. As I know, never said speaking of Russian is evidence of a crime. Right. It's funny, man. My friend came over the other day, and he was on this Russian thing, and I'm like, you're regurgitating like the stuff that's just being put into you completely uncritically. It's like, I understand you dislike Donald Trump. I also dislike Donald Trump. But what you're telling me is about Russia hacking the election. You can't explain to me why you believe that, other than this is what I read and this is what I saw. And beyond that, you cannot make a link between those things. And ultimately, he ended up with, well, they're doing an investigation. Then how do you know? You seem pretty sure about this stuff, even though you've just said you don't know. You've just done an investigation. How do you know that it was a hack and not a leak? Well, they're doing an investigation. Okay. Regurgitating full on. And it's like making the point to them, you understand that they're doing this Russian stuff purely to obfuscate. Even if they did hack us, what you're saying is they hacked us to release information that was fundamentally true about Democratic Party cheating Bernie Sanders. We're mad that you cheated us by showing that we were cheating somebody else. I asked him, do you honestly believe that that's why she lost? No, I don't believe that's why she lost. Then why are you talking about it? Why is this the conversation? Why isn't the failures the conversation? Meaning, wouldn't the actual conversation that you want to have for something like this is, what caused you to fail to this degree? How did you lose to a guy who could have been beaten by a ham sandwich? And that is the exact conversation they don't want to have. And the problem is, in 2018, if they take the House and the Senate, that is the exact conversation you would never get. Lefties need their own party. Lefties need their own party. You can't have a party where both of these antagonistic forces are in the same party. Somebody's getting shafted. The interest of somebody like Obama is not the exact same interest of you. Meaning, the person who's in office that's supposed to represent you does not necessarily have your interests at heart. They try to make it look like this is kind of one unified thing. This is not a unified country. And the biggest division is class. The idea that you have one party that has two class systems in that particular party, and one time after the next, each time something comes up, it always goes to the upper class. The upper class is the one that's actually paying money. The politician is there to explain what's coming out and what the negotiation is. But the negotiation is not between you and your politician for some degree. That politician is a public relations specialist. He is there to parrot out what the people who are paying him is telling him to parrot out. You need to have something that represents your interests, meaning you need to have your own thing. Lefties need to have their own thing. Your interest is not served in either of these parties. And mind you, this is not just for lefties. It's not just for lefties. It's just for people with good fucking conscience in the first place. If you want something actually done, you need to have your own. You're not going to get those results out of the Democratic Party. At least I'm extraordinarily skeptical of it. So, I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, this one went a little bit long, but if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. And guys, for all the people who donated today, thank you very much. It's absolutely appreciated. You guys are amazing help. Thanks guys. I have one or two more right after this one, so I will be back in probably about 10 or 15. Thanks guys.